Hey YouTube, welcome back. Let's talk about Mike Epps, his daughter, and Photoshop. Alright, so just in case you may not know, um, the comedian Michael Epps recently came under fire and scrutiny because he posted a photo of him and his daughter on social media. And the photo featured his daughter having straight, basically long, straight hair. You know, some people, may refer to that as, good hair. But some people were taken aback by this and even offended by this. And of course, you have some people coming through and running interference and with the capes on, talking about, well, y'all can't be complaining about that. Yeah, especially y'all black women, y'all don't need to be complaining about that. Y'all be wearing wigs and weaves and suffering from diabetes all the time. Who are you to be talking about somebody? So, that was some people's arguments. It's always, in the black community, it always centers or circles back to black women who wear weave and wigs for some reason. And we could be talking about like um, black men and police brutality. And it circles right back around somehow, some way to black women wearing weave and wigs and makeup. We could be talking about black men getting jobs, black men in the job market, black men being entrepreneurs, um, black men building up their communities. Somehow, some way, it will circle back around to the black man can't do this because the black woman wears too much wigs, weaves, makeup. Um, she is obese, overweight. She suffers from diabetes, mellitus, etc. And of course, these are just deflection tactics used to avoid having to have really difficult conversations, avoiding having to admit fault, avoiding having to admit that there's stuff that can be improved upon, admit that black men are lacking in areas, etc. Right? These are just deflection tactics. But that was a bit of a ramble, a bit of a tangent. But I want to jump back to the situation with Michael Elliott Epps and his daughter. So I'll say that colorism is more than who dates who. That is an aspect to colorism, but it's more than that. And this situation is just an example of that, right? Because this situation doesn't really involve dating, right? And romance and sex and things like that. But rather, this situation involves features. And some people saying, well, is hair texture really considered colorism? Hair and skin tone are different. And that's true, but it ultimately falls under the umbrella of colorism. Some people may refer to it as like texturism. And then some people argue that, well, y'all making isms for everything. Oh, y'all just want to make isms anytime somebody got a preference. And it's like, well, is this situation with Mike Epps' daughter and possibly the mother of their daughter, or the mother of his daughter, is that considered a preference at this point? I guess technically you can argue that this is a preference, because I really think that this may be how Mike Epps and the mom wanted the daughter to look. But I think the way that the daughter looked, she came out more leaning towards Mike Epps' phenotype versus the mother's phenotype, right? So I guess this is their preference. I guess they are expressing how they preferred their daughter to look. But still, um, where does this preference come from? That's something that kind of needs to be unpacked too, because I don't think these preferences just come out of thin air. They're developed over time and through like a person's immediate family, through the environment that they live in, through the media, through the culture, etc. Right? And ultimately, those are factors, but still, folks have to take responsibility for the brainwashing that they have received and take steps to undo that brainwashing and undo that psychological damage that they've been subjected to. And I think in some instances we do that when it comes to like, oh, anti-blackness, we gotta fight against that. That's anti-black. And that's good and that's cool and that's great. But it's like sometimes folks kind of be like, well, yeah, that's anti-black, but that ain't really my problem. You feel me? Like, oh, that's racism, but that ain't really my problem. So, or either they kind of indulge in it, right? Because some people indulge in the colorism. Some people really just like they participate in it. So if they are participating in it, they may not be so. I mean, think about it. If you participate in something, you tend to enjoy it, right? I'm sure there are some exceptions and outliers about, participation. If someone's putting a gun to your head or you're being forced in some way to participate, right? But a lot of these do, it's like, it's cool, right? Cool enough. Um, and also another thing to mention in this conversation is, calling out black men's obsession with, you know, loosely textured hair, right? Considering that the average black woman wouldn't fall into the category of having loosely textured hair, right? Why is that seemingly a preference for a segment of black men? And why isn't that preference being shamed, right? Because we can shame other things, right? You know, we can shame the black women who wear the weave and the makeup and the wigs. We can shame the black men who simp, right? So we know how to shame people, right? When they are outside of what we deem acceptable. But I think this is something that we deem acceptable. Colorism is seemingly acceptable. As long as you're directing the colorism towards the people, the groups of people in the community who it's cool to do it to, right? Right. But yeah, what is black men's, obsession with loosely textured hair? If it don't apply, let it fly. But there is a segment of black men who, seem to have that preference, you know. And also, more importantly, for Mike Epps and the mother, like, do they feel like their daughter isn't good enough the way that she naturally looks? And that is something that, is a conversation that needs to be had when it comes to people who are mixing phenotypes, especially. Um, and people always seem to bring up this conversation about um, mixed children are perhaps mixed looking children and their well-being when they are coming from, like when a darker skinned black woman is involved. And, again, that is sort of like a tactic in order to have a way to attack darker skinned black women who may date outside of their phenotype, um, and just a way to attack darker skinned black women in general. Yeah. But the argument is usually something along the lines of, oh, how will these darker skinned black women treat their biracial daughters? Or perhaps even just their lighter skinned daughters, but especially their biracial daughters. Um, you know, Biracial daughters would, of course, come from black women who procreate with non-black men, and the light-skinned daughters would assumably come from darker-skinned black women who may procreate with lighter-skinned black men or biracial black men who are part black, right? And I think folks kind of let the lighter skin, they let that thing slide, But when there comes to the darker skinned black women procreating with non-black men, then that's when everybody and their black mama got an opinion, right? Everybody. But I think I'm going on a bit of another tangent, so let me circle back around to this situation. But the thing is, it's sort of difficult not to go on a tangent because everything ends up being connected in some way, right? Um, but yeah, ultimately, I feel like this is part of the reason that many black women, not all, but a good segment of black women wear weaves and lace front wigs because the community has shown that this is what is desirable. This is how they want black women to look, right? And also, this is done to appeal to black men. And it's not just the Pookie and Ray Rays, it's the educated brothers too, you know. But no one ever wants to really call out this BS and have a really honest conversation about it. People run from it and try to deflect and just avoid it because it makes people feel weird, uncomfortable, guilty, and those are like negative emotions that people don't like to feel. So people avoid situations that make them feel that way. Right? And then we also have to start assigning blame, and folks don't like to be blamed for things, even if they are guilty of sin. People don't want to be blamed and taken a task on it. And then there's an argument of self-love. You gotta love yourself, black woman. Black woman, you better love yourself. Stop looking to the media for all this validation you want. You need to love yourself from within, sister. Strong black sister. Right? And that is a part of it. But it's difficult to have self-love when you're not nurtured to have self-love, when you're nurtured to go against it. And some people may come from environments where that is the case. Perhaps Mike Epps' daughter may end up coming from an environment like that. So, I'm not saying that it's impossible, not that it's impossible to love yourself, but I'm saying it's more difficult. And I think we as the community may be able to play a role in helping to foster self-love amongst really the whole community, but especially black women. Right? We can help push that along if we want to, right? If it's a priority. But the thing is, many people are apathetic to it. And then they end up trying to disguise their apathy as just, oh, self-accountability. You got to be accountable, black woman. That's a tactic that folks like to use, right? Because people aren't so apathetic when they feel like it's something that could affect them directly, or they may see themselves in the person who's being affected. case in point, this situation with the baby that's going down right now. You notice like a lot of black men, especially, are jumping into the mix to defend the baby, right? And I'm like, all right, folks have a right to defend who they want to defend, but you can't get none of these dudes to jump into situations involving black women who need to be defended, black women who are attacked for colorism, right? You can't pay these dudes sometimes. Like, you can't even pay these dudes enough money to show up and show out for black women like that, right? But these dudes claim to be so down for the community, right, and pro-black with it, right? And also talking about, oh, the media, right, and the influence that it can have on the children, right? But when it comes to these dudes, especially these rappers, and their influence on the youth and the influence that they can potentially have, then it's like, oh, you have to raise your children. You have to be mindful of what they watch. And that's true, you do. You do have to, that's when parenting does come in. But it's like, well, that's not your excuse when it's something that you feel that shouldn't be broadcast, right? It's like, oh, what about the children? But when it's you participating in degeneracy, then it's like, oh well, you got to be a parent. That's when that parenting come into play, Sean. And ultimately, it's just hypocrisy, right? It's just like folks aren't so. It's like degeneracy, but it's degeneracy that some people are cool with, and then there's degeneracy that some people are not cool with. All right. But back to this situation with Mike Epps yet again. um, so in this Photoshop photo, I noticed that Mike Epps and perhaps his wife, the mother of the daughter, I noticed that they didn't Photoshop Mike Epps in the photo. Mike Epps, crawfish looking ninja self, right? Why not? Why not Photoshop his face, his ug mug in the photo, right? But do you think if the daughter was a son instead, do you think that they would have photoshopped the photo? You think so? I don't think so. Probably not. I don't think they would be so quick to Photoshop the photo. I think they would just be like, oh, well, whatever. You know, it's all good in the hood. Oh, he look just like his daddy. Oh. But another thing to bring up, though, do you think if, say, Serena Williams or Jodie Turner-Smith, or even like maybe like even like a Holly Berry or like Tamara Mar, if they did this and photoshopped photos of their daughters, but especially like Serena Williams and Jodie Turner-Smith, if they did that, how do you think people would react to that? I feel like when it comes to Serena Williams and Jodie Turner-Smith, they'll be coming through with the drag brigade, all right, just ready to drag Jodie and Serena across the internet and back, because they really have like kind of like anti-black woman sentiments, and they have a reason now. If Jodie and Serena were to do that, they would have like a legitimate reason to drag them, right? It's no like, oh, let's try to like see what caused them to have this mentality, right? Let's be sympathetic and empathetic toward them. No, nah, right? Then it's also some people like, oh well, We have more important things to talk about than Mike Epps and his daughter on Photoshop photo. So we getting killed out here. We in a pandemic. Black women got weaves. You know, so that's another tactic, but they wouldn't be using that tactic when it comes to Serena and Jody. Folks wouldn't be saying, oh, we got more important things to talk about than that. Why are we spending our time talking about that? Nuh-uh. All right. So there is a bias, right? A gender bias at play. Right? When it comes to these situations like colorism, right? When folks are like, oh, let's call out colorism. When there's a dark-skinned black woman engaging in it in some way. Let's call out colorism. We gotta call her out. She ain't no good. She the reason why we got colorism issues in the black community. That ain't no preference, y'all. That ain't no preference. She hate her dark-skinned self. She hate her dark-skinned children. She hate her dark-skinned daddy. She hate her dark-skinned brother. She hate anything that dark-skinned. That's why she got with a cave beast and had a child with him. Shoot, ain't no black queen supposed to be with no cave beast, have no children by no cave beast, birthing no cave beast kids. And don't y'all bring up the black man either. When the black man has children with the non-black women, them children black. Black power children right there. All right. The black man carries the black seed. All right. You are what your daddy is. Then we get into that. All right. But for the people who say that we have more important things to talk about, right, then talk about them or shut up. Because it's like, you ain't really talking about them things. You weren't talking about those things beforehand, definitely. And then when folks talking about this, you're just like, oh, we have more important things to talk about. Well, okay, talk about them. Bring them up. Have conversations about them. But don't come into other people's conversations trying to derail the conversation. Start your own conversation about the important things that you want to talk about over there. Right. And another thing that I want to bring up that is really important is pedo vibes that I'm getting from this situation a little bit. Because, and perhaps this may be me having a bit of a bias when it comes to men versus women, when children are involved, especially daughters. But I do think that there is, especially when it comes to the men who are colorists, there is a link between colorism and sexual perversion and even violence, in my opinion. Right? Don't trust them. Right? Like this photo of Mike Epps, I think low-key it does have somewhat of a pedophilic vibe with it. Because it's like, why did you feel the need to change the way that his daughter looks? Because the hair texture was changed, the skin tone was touched up somewhat too, and I believe even the eyes were sort of widened. Like they made the eyes a little bit bigger. And it's like, okay, do you want someone to view your daughter as, oh, she's so cute and adorable and so precious? Or do you want people to view your daughter as like, oh, like she is so sexy? I don't know. Maybe I'm reaching with this, but I feel like, I don't know, I'm picking up on a weird pedophilic vibe. Right? Hopefully it doesn't go any further than this, and maybe I'm just misinterpreting this, hopefully for the sake of his daughter. But This wouldn't be the first time, though. I feel like, this has come up a couple of times beforehand, like, say, YG and his daughter, right? Tyrese and his daughter, you know. And also, wasn't Kanye West a while ago complaining and ranting and raving about his daughter North following in Kim Kardashian's footsteps? And I'm like, well, what did you expect to happen? And I don't even think this has really happened yet, but they're feeling like Kanye may be feeling like, oh, she's being groomed to follow in Kim Kardashian's footsteps. That may be true. Or maybe Kanye West just may be needing to take his meds. Um, but it's like, well, but what did you expect, though? I guess you ain't really think that far into the future about having a kid with Kim Kardashian and getting married to Kim Kardashian. But again, like, what were you expecting for her to do? For her to be the next Michelle Obama? Like, and really, yeah, to keep it 1,000, Kanye, you should have chose better. Because if this was a black woman complaining about some black men and, some black men grooming their son to follow in his um, thug gangster Glocktavius footsteps, then folks would be saying, well, you should have chose better, black woman. That's why y'all always be choosing thugs and gangsters and pookies and ray-rays to have children with, right? You could have had children with anybody, but you chose him. It's your fault. And there is some truth in that. But it's also Kanye West's fault. You know, let's not stop with self-accountability, when it comes to black men. Like, oh, well, y'all can't be blaming our black kings for everything. Y'all can't be telling our black kings to be accountable for everything. Black kings don't gotta be accountable for everything. It ain't their fault. Sometimes us black women, we do be nagging our black kings a little bit too much and expecting a little bit too much of our black kings. I mean, you expecting him to, you know, be a father to your children that y'all had together, and you expecting him to go to work and pay bills. You gotta pick one, sister. You can't be having all these requirements for our black kings like that. That's why they be going outside the community. Don't even want to deal with us no more. Unless, they want us to help them get out of legal trouble. Want us to help them protest the system and police brutality. And trust me, sister, when it comes to my black king, I'm gonna be out there. I'm gonna be out there marching and twerking on the front lines for my king. Ain't no way. Ain't no way I ain't gonna be out there. Alright? Y'all make it hard out here for real black queen like me. I'm sorry, black king. I'm sorry for these bad black women. I'm sorry about that. I'm gonna try and get at them. I'm gonna try to make them do better. Alright? And, that's how it be, though. But I guess I mentioned all that I have to say about this situation, though. I don't really think I have much else to say. Well, thank you very much for watching this video. Let me know what you think about this situation in the comment section. I guess one more thing I can mention that now that I brought it up, as far as I guess my personal journey, I guess when it comes to like hair texture, my own hair texture and things like that, I have a video where I discuss that in depth, and I'll leave a link to that video in the description if you're interested in sort of hearing more about my take on hair texture. You know, my personal hair texture that is, you know, I guess rather a hair texture on, you know, other folk. All right. So there you got it. So let me know what you think about all of this in the comments section. Until the next video, adios and goodbye for now.